Hey everyone, this is Miss Rodriguez, and now we're moving on into classification, or the tree of life. So, your bell ringer was, why do we need a universal name for an organism, and what kind of problems would we run into if we didn't? So think about it. If everybody had their own name for the same species, when you go from one country to another, you could be both talking about a panda, but you wouldn't know what it was because you guys had two different names. You wouldn't know how to classify it or anything like that. So this is where the system of classification kind of takes control and solves this problem for us. Now, before this man named Carol Linnaeus came up with his classification system, people used to name things on their own, and since there was no universal name, it was very hard to know what exactly anybody was talking about. So, like what I was saying, we could both be talking about a panda, but if you call it something else where you're from, and I call it something else, and then we meet up and we're talking about the exact same thing, but we're like, oh no, yeah, I have this different species and it's called this and this. That creates a problem because we don't know exactly what you're talking about, but then when it comes down to it, it's the exact same animal. In the 1750s, Linnaeus created the classification system to solve this problem. So taxonomy allows us to group organisms and refer to them so that all scientists know what is being talked about specifically. So when we classify something, we're using the taxonomy. Okay, it's the science of classification. So you sort a set of objects by the same attributes. So you can go by color, size, even the food they eat, just like carnivores and herbivores. And then you would break it down even further. Okay, so it goes from very, very general to very, very, very specific. Linnaeus classified the organisms based on the physical and structural characteristics. Remember, this is in the 1750s, so they didn't have the technology to go ahead and do all of these genetic testing and stuff like that to see, if these species were actually related, regardless of what they looked like. Each organism was put into a group, and that was part of a much larger, more general group. So like I said, very broad to very specific. Each organism gets a two-part name. It's called binomial nomenclature. So the first one is the genus, the second name is the species. The genus is always capitalized and the species is not. For example, Homo sapiens. Homo is capitalized, that's our genus, and sapiens is the species. That's the second name, and it's all in lowercase. So why exactly do we need a naming system? Well, it allows people all over the world to talk about a specific organism without any confusion. So any kind of scientific articles or anything like that, you could literally read them from anywhere around the world, and because we have this classification system, we have one name for it, we know exactly who we're talking about, what we're talking about. We don't have to have any conflicts or anything like that as far as data or research that comes our way. And having the scientific name helps us weed out, several common names. What we call something here in the United States, they may call something else locally and in a different country. But when you look at it scientifically, the scientific name is exactly what that organism is. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. So in Linnaeus' system of classification, he had 7 levels, also known as taxa. They were kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The best way to remember all the levels of the classification system is by a mnemonic device. Now in this one, it includes domain. Originally when Linnaeus did it, there was no domain. Domain comes in later on in modern times. But the best way to remember this is Donkey Kong put cookies on fries, get some. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And if you look at it, Donkey Kong put the chocolate chip cookies on the McDonald's fries, get some. Might not be very appetizing, but it helps you remember. So an example of taxonomy, okay, if we're looking at the Atlantic bottlenose dolphin. Kingdom is Animalia, it's an animal. Phylum would be Chordata, that's because it has a backbone. Class is Mammalia because it's a mammal. Order, Cetacea because it's a porpoise. Family, Delphinidae, it's a dolphin. Genus, Tursiops, which makes it an Atlantic bottlenose. And species, Truncanthus. Okay, that's exactly how all organisms are classified in this classification system. all the way down. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Like I said, binomial nomenclature. That's your system that we use to name all of our organisms. Their first name is the genus and the last is the species. Genus is always capital and species is lowercase. It's either in italics or it's underlined. It is a universal language. It's written in Latin because Latin is the basis for all written language. So why do we use a scientific name? Here's a prime example. They all look very, very much the same. Puma, mountain lion, ghost cat, cougar, devil cat, screaming cat, Florida panther. Scientifically, they're all the same. Okay, but there's several common names for it. Alright, polar bear is called Ursus maritimus. The first part of the name Ursus is the genus to which the organism belongs. So the genus Ursus contains other species of bears, also known as, brown bears, black bears, panda bears, koala bears. So they're all under the same genus. It's the same group. Maritimus is a specific species, which is specifically polar bears. The Latin word maritimus refers to the sea. Polar bears often live on pack ice that floats on the sea, so that is why the polar bears get Ursus maritimus. The second part of your binomial nomenclature is normally unique to the species, and it's probably because it describes where the organism's habitat is or an important trait about them, and that's what distinguishes them from the rest of the genus. For instance, blacktip reef shark, Carcharodontis melanopterus. Carcharodontis is a requiem shark, means it's live-bearing young, warm waters, including brackish water. They have round eyes, pectoral fins, and 5 gill slits. Melanopterus is black fin. So you can see on the dorsal fin and on the pectoral fins that the blacktip shark has black tips on its fins. So the Linnaean system of classification, we do have limits to them. It only classifies based on physical similarities. So if we think back to the last couple sections, when we were talking about homologous and analogous structures, alright, as you can see here, the red panda, which is all the way off to your right, used to originally be classified with raccoons because it looks very, very similar to a raccoon. When they did x-rays and things like that and found out that it actually, bone structure wise, related more to it's a panda bear. So even though it looked very similar to a raccoon, it was misplaced because yes, it physically looked like it, but scientifically when we did testing and stuff like that, it did not look like it. Alright, so this is going to end screencast 1. After that, we're going to go into screencast 2, and we'll get into all the problems with a traditional classification when Linnaeus originally made this classification system and how modern classification has changed it.